Big news for FSU today as they land a 4-star offensive tackle in Chastan Brown. Again, 4-star composite, the number 29 offensive tackle in the country, a top 200 player according to 247 Sports. He is a 6'7", 270-pound tackle that Florida State adds to their 2025 class. Obviously, the early signing period earlier in December, but you can still add to your class through regular signing day, which is here early February timeframe. And so they add him to the class at a very much position of need, a position that Florida State needs to continue to stack talent. 2023 was his first year playing varsity football. Last year, he was named the Region 1, that's AAA, 6A offensive lineman of the year. Kid was committed to UCF prior, was going to sign, I believe, in that early signing period. But with Herb Hand and Gus Malzahn coming over to Florida State, backed off of that, Florida State saw the window, saw their opportunity, forged ahead on those relationships that he had previous, and he is now a Seminole. This is a big-time pickup for Florida State for a couple of reasons. Number one, they have to continue to stack talent at and in the offensive line room, especially at that tackle position. It feels like for the last 4 years, all we've done is recruit guard-type frames, guard-type bodies, and the few tackles that we have recruited, we've not developed them especially well. Now, the question with this commit is, will development take place now? You obviously have a new line coach. You've got a new system being implemented. You've got just new everything at Florida State on the offensive side of the ball, it seems. And so time will tell, right? However, anytime you can add a top 200 type player to your commit list, then to your class, to your roster, to your program, it is a big deal. And it's a good job by Florida State to stay on him, to continue the relationship that he had with Coach Hand and Coach Malzahn and get him into this class. We've talked about offensive line recruiting needing to be better. It actually hasn't been one of the worst positions that we've had on the roster by any means, but what you lost with Atkins from a recruiting standpoint, I know the development was where we were all complaining and where we all had question marks about Alex, but what you've lost from a recruiting standpoint, you will need to make that up, and you will need to bring in guys that are highly sought after. And when you can land a kid that is a true tackle frame, when you can land a kid that is in the top 200 of the composite rankings, a very highly sought after prospect, it is a big deal for you to do so. And I think that you've landed a kid that's probably not as big of a project as other offensive linemen that you've taken. I think that you can probably get him on the field a little bit faster than maybe some of your lower, more project, lower 3-star type commits. Obviously, the relationship with Herb Hand, a big deal in this. It was maybe obvious, when he didn't end up signing with UCF after being committed to them for a while, after his coach left, after Malzahn. It was maybe obvious that this was Florida State's to lose. However, you still have to finish. We've had pretty obvious layups in the past, pretty obvious recruitments in the past where we've said, like, okay, what the heck happened here? How did we blow this? Big shout out to Florida State for not doing that, for staying on it, for continuing that relationship and getting him into this class. Obviously, anytime you're flipping a 4-star, anytime you're signing a top 200 player, you have to give a little bit of love to the Battle's End. You have to shout out what Ingram and the guys are doing over there. It doesn't happen without them, right? This celebrating that we're doing, the slight celebrating, I know that we're all just kind of ready for football to get here so that we can see what happens. None of that happens without the Battle's End. So obviously a shout out there as well. The immediate results of Hand seem to be pretty positive. What they've done in the portal, what they've done in the recruiting class has been pretty positive. Now, it's going to take some time, and you're not always going to be able to fall back on, oh, well, you had this guy that you had committed at UCF, or you had this guy that you were recruiting at UCF, and he was at FIU, and you were able to pull him. Now we'll have the full year for Hand to develop relationships, and we'll see what kind of results we can get out of that. I'm pretty hopeful. We spoke with Clay Fink of Noles 24/7 about that when Herb Hand was hired, just what we thought we could get out of him from a recruiting perspective. And I'll tell you, for only having been on campus for about a month, A lot of that being on the road, a lot of that being out visiting, a lot of that being familiarizing yourself with the current recruits, and obviously getting a big time portal class in. I'm fairly pleased with the results. Listen, I don't want to take anything away from Herb Hand or Mike Norvell or Gus Malzahn or anybody that recruits at Florida State, but if you put forward just a small amount of effort at Florida State, it's really not that hard to recruit, right? This is a top 15 program of all time, probably inching toward that top 10, and that's counting the 50 years that Florida State didn't play football in the last century. If you're just looking at the last 30 years, I mean, this is a top 10 program. And so you should be able to recruit fairly well at Florida State. You should be able to be up in and around and inside of that top 10 on a yearly basis. And so can we get the effort? Can we get the results to match the brand for which this program and these recruiters are recruiting? So far, so good with Hand. We'll see how that continues into the 26 class. But as for today, a big time pickup, a position of need, a position that you have to build around, and a top 200 recruit commits to the Seminoles. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you guys for hanging out. We'll talk to you guys soon. Go Noles.